Hello everyone, this is Kingrats here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. The Stanley Cup playoffs for the NHL have really started to heat up as of late. Every series has now commenced in some shape or form, and most series have now seen at least 2 to 3 games. And I thought it might be a good time to look at the early results of every series to see how the teams are doing and analyze how the games have gone and who's performing good, who's not performing great. I'm going to try and do maybe a couple of episodes on this because of the number of series in the first round, so expect probably at least 3 series to be discussed in every video, and then I will revisit all of these series at the end of the first round to see basically how things went over time. If you guys like this type of content, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this one and spread the word. And without further ado, let's get into it. So series number 1, let's look at the Carolina Hurricanes versus the New Jersey Devils. So this series has gone through 2 games with Carolina winning both of them at home. And now the series will transition to New Jersey with game number 3 happening tomorrow night, which will be April 25th. So far, if you want to look at this series from basically kind of a general glance, if you haven't caught up to the games, Carolina has done a very good job of dominating possession and taking advantage of the fact that the Devils have really dealt with a couple of problems in this series. If you like analytics, I'll bring up a couple of graphics here for you. As you can see on the left hand side, this is the total shot zone area for the Carolina Hurricanes so far through 2 games. As you could tell that they've gotten a lot of their shots basically in the high danger area in front of the goaltender and mostly within the slot area or the face-off dots, and they've also gotten pretty good production coming up from the point. In addition, you can also see that they've also dictated a lot of the play here. They've done a pretty good job in the offensive zone, controlling possession for about 45% of their time, and they have dealt with some issues in the defensive zone with about 35.6% of their time being spent in their own end. But that's mostly because of the fact that special teams has played a bit of a factor here. Carolina has done a pretty good job on the power play, and they've also prevented the Devils from getting much momentum on the special teams, so pretty good job for them. If you look at New Jersey on their hand, they have kind of struggled to maintain their offense. They have been a little bit more balanced in their approach, getting a lot more shots from the perimeter and mostly from like the inner slot area. High danger chances have been a little bit less to come by for them, but they have done at least an okay job with the roster that they have right now to get into that inner slot. In addition, the Devils have struggled in basically every zone area. They have really struggled to get much offensive zone time in this series, and they've spent a lot of time in their own end due to Carolina basically hemming them on the power play. An important thing we have to figure out, of course, is the goaltending situation. For Frederik Andersen of Carolina, he's had a pretty solid job right now in net for the Hurricanes, as through 2 games he's only given up 2 goals against, and he's got a .960 save percentage, so he's done a very good job considering the number of shots that the Devils have put on him. On the other hand, Jacob Markstrom has done an admirable job to keep the Devils in games, but it has been challenging considering that he hasn't really gotten too much run support. He still sports a .930 save percentage through 2 games played, but he has given up a number of goals that have kind of been out of his control. The biggest thing, of course, is that Carolina has taken advantage of the Devils' depleted roster because of injuries. Of course, they were already without Jack Hughes because of an injury earlier in the season that took him out for the rest of the year. And at the same time, after Game 1, the Devils lost Brendan Dillon and Luke Hughes to injuries, and they did not play in Game 2, and already the Devils' depth chart is being tested. I think they got in, like, Dennis Cholowski, for example, to fill in as the 7th D-man in Game number 2. I'm not sure what their matchup is looking like for Game number 3, but already the Devils' depth is being tested, and it hasn't really gone well for them. They haven't really been able to give Markstrom much run support, and the scoring has definitely gone down for New Jersey considering the talent depletion that they have on the ice. And this is going to take a lot of effort from guys like Nico Hischier, for example, to drive more of the offense, and they're going to have to look for other players, for example, like Stefan Nason and Dawson Mercer, for example, to really step things up if they want to get back in the series. If they can't get much run support, then Jacob Markstrom would basically have to provide a Herculean effort to steal a game for New Jersey, but right now it's really looking like Carolina is just going to run away with this series all the way through. Moving on, we've got the Battle of Ontario with the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Ottawa Senators. Through 2 games, Toronto is leading the series 2 games to none, and game number 3 will be tonight, April 24th in Ottawa. Of course, there has been quite a lot of discussion surrounding this series at this point in time. With Toronto leading the series, it's kind of been a matter of luck that they actually are like leading this far. It's their first 2-0 series lead in like over 20 years. And if you look at the analytics, it doesn't really show that they've really been doing a great job of late. As you can see from Toronto's total shot counter, they're getting a lot of shots in the high danger areas and also in the slots, but they've been very limited in other cases to, let's say, the right side point and a little bit from the perimeter. But really, they've done a great job of exploiting Ottawa's defense that obviously doesn't have a lot of playoff experience, and they've taken advantage of special teams in particular. If you look at the zone time, Toronto's done a decent job, but they're not necessarily like destroying it on the offensive zone, only controlling about 40% of play there. They have taken advantage of power plays as they've scored, I think, 4 power play goals through 2 games on like 7 attempts. So they have taken advantage of a lack of discipline from Ottawa that has definitely burned the Senators so far in this series. The big problem with Toronto is that they've really been laid back up to this point, especially in game 2 where the team only had like 10 shots through 2 periods, and they basically allowed the Senators to pretty much dictate play for the majority of game 2, and that allowed for Ottawa to force the game to go to overtime. The big problem here is that basically once the Leafs have a lead, they're most likely going to just curl up into a defensive shell, and that's basically how they're going to play. So they're going to be very conservative on offense, probably not doing much, and basically just allowing the Sens to dominate puck possession and basically have control of the ice for most of the game, and giving them basically that opportunity to catch up. If you look at Ottawa, considering as I mentioned that they've dictated play a lot in this series, through 2 games they've got a lot of shots on goal. They've done a decent job of getting, to some degree, getting shots on net. They've outshot the Leafs in both games in this series, but they have been restricted mostly to the perimeter, and they haven't done that well of a job of getting many shots into like high danger areas. They do have more high danger shots than the Leafs do, but as you can see, they've got a steady diet of shots coming from the perimeter in the faceoff circle, the point, especially on the right hand side near the benches, and it's just not been that effective up to this point. They also haven't capitalized much on the special teams as Toronto has. As you can see, Ottawa has been able to really dominate things offensively, but defensively they have struggled. Of course, they need to find a way to fix up their penalty kill for the series going forward. Of course, we also have to consider the goaltending matchup here, Anthony Stolarz versus Linus Ullmark. Linus Ullmark in particular has definitely been struggling this series, and it's led to some debate regarding his ability to be a playoff performer. Of course, this is his 3rd postseason of his career, as he's already played in 2 separate seasons with Boston over the last couple years, and he has struggled in those series as well. So far this year, through 2 games, he's currently sporting an .800 save percentage and a 4.39 goals against average, which is not fun. And considering that he has to really find a way to rebound if he wants to give the Sens some serious hope here, and Game 3 is going to be a major test for him. What he did do a good job was in Game 2, after he gave up the 2nd goal, he did provide himself a little bit of confidence by basically shutting the door for the Leafs for the remainder of the game and allowing Ottawa to tie it and force overtime. Of course, you can't really blame how some of the goals have been kind of lucky, whether it's a backdoor tap-in or a random deflection that has basically gone past him. You can't really blame him for some of these goals, and also due to a lack of good defensive positioning by the Senators, they have kind of gotten him laid out to dry, basically. For Toronto, however, if they really want to convince people that they are a dominant threat for contending for the Cup this year, they basically need to show a little bit more offensive urgency against the Senators. I do get that they want to have that defensive structure, but they need to show people that they can basically run away with the offense and make sure that games that they have a good lead on don't become an overtime game. And that's going to be very important. Okay, so for the 3rd series, I've got Winnipeg versus St. Louis. Currently through 2 games, Winnipeg is leading 2 games to none. And this series has been kind of 2 different stories. For one, game number 1 was quite a shootout. I think the final score was 5-3 in favor of Winnipeg. And game number 2 was a lot more of a goaltending duel between Binnington and Hellebuck. If you look at the analytics side of things, the Jets have been doing a very good job of getting shots in the high danger areas, and they have gotten a steady diet of some shots coming from the perimeter, but not too many. They have done a very good job of getting in that danger area. They have dictated most possession in this game with 44% offensive zone time, which is a pretty decent number. They haven't done too much work on the special teams, but whenever they do have their opportunities, they have done a decent job over there. For St. Louis, on the other hand, shots have been very limited. They haven't done too much of a good job in gaining a lot of possession. As you could tell, their zone time is significantly different to the Jets, and they have spent a lot of time in their own zone, and that's been a significant problem for them. They're going to need to find a way to basically maintain their discipline, draw more penalties, so that way they can actually utilize their power play a lot more and give Jordan Binnington a little bit more time to relax and give him that sort of freedom to, have that extra goal support. If you do look at the goaltending matchup in particular between Hellebuck and Binnington, this is of course taken from NHL Edge, but you can see the head-to-head matchup between these two guys. Hellebuck has been pretty much I guess you could say, superior goalie, but we could certainly say that Binnington has definitely kept some of the games close up to this point and has allowed for the Blues to at least try to stay within it. Of course, some of these numbers are still skewed because of what happened in game number 1 between these two teams, but at least up to this point in time, the analytics are saying that Hellebuck is clearly the superior goaltender and that Binnington might not have the same magic as he had back in 2019, for example. But of course, a lot of stuff can change after a couple of games, right? And game 3 is happening tonight, so we'll see how things go there. Anyway, guys, that's 3 series right now. Let me know what you all think. Leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel for more content like this one, and I'll see you all next time.